Good. Welcome, you all. Welcome, Glenn. I just saw you writing in the chat. Super excited to have you all to talk today about circularity is the only winning business model. We have really great speakers today, and I hope for a good discussion with you all at the end of the session. So get your questions ready. I will take us through at the start here the agenda and the speakers and just a tiny bit of background on Nordic sustainability. Before I do that, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping things. We will record the webinar and share both the recording on our YouTube channel, but also the slides and the presentations in an email after the webinar to the participants. So you don't need to start screenshotting. You don't need to get all the notes jotted down. You'll get the material afterwards. We will also have as I said, a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So do list the question or do write your questions as we go along, preferably, so we can start sorting them and cover as many as possible at the end of the webinar in our Q&A slot. I would also encourage you, as I think everyone's starting to do here, or a good amount of people are starting to do, write down your name and the company or maybe also country you come from. And we can all know, at least have a bit of a feeling of the kind of community of people that's taking part in the webinar. Great. In terms of the agenda, we will start after my introductory remarks here with a 15-minute presentation of Lina about circularity and how we see it as Nordic sustainability and how we see some of the barriers that we need to unlock as a field for circularity to scale. And then we're lucky to have two practical cases from Danfoss and Remarkable of how these two companies work with circularity. And then afterwards, we will have a Q&A session. So third reminder, please get your questions in the chat as we go along. Great. Our panelists today, starting from the middle and going outwards, we have Lina Psarra from Danfoss, who's the circularity and sustainability lead. Then we have Mina Shukri, who is part of our team at Nordic Sustainability and also a team lead in all things nature, climate, and circularity in LCAs. And then we have Magnus Graven from who's VP Sustainability at Remarkable. So great list of speakers. I look forward to diving into the topic with you and also seeing if we can get to some of the difficult nuggets in the discussions. Super. A couple words about us, just for those who might not know us. We are a Copenhagen-based sustainability consultancy with roughly around 40 people. We typically work with the large and ambitious players in the field. We are kind of a full suite sustainability consultancy with a strategy team where we do everything from strategy development and implementation. Of course, also a lot of work related to kind of the value and value at risk side. We have a reporting policy team, climate nature team, and a sustainable investment finance team. We work with many global leading companies in the field, among the Fortune 500 and corporate knights, and we work typically across sectors, but a lot with companies that have physical products, and we have a quite international client base across Europe, also reflecting, of course, the size of companies that we typically work with, in addition to the smaller ones that we also do. I think you'll get more of an insight as we go along. And with that, and without further ado, I'll hand over to Mina to get us kicked off.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Sven. Just a brief introduction of who I am. My name is Mina Shukri. I co-team lead our climate and circularity team here at Nordic Sustainability. I'm super excited for the session today. I think the topic is generally really interesting. So let me get us started off by the key takeaways that I think this session will present, at least my bit of it. First of all, circularity isn't scaling. That's our current situation. And we obviously need it to, if we want to have both a thriving planet, but also a scalable business community. Second of all, to actually scale circularity, we need to overcome the barriers that are associated with implementing circularity. Here, we need to acknowledge that human and financial barriers are just as important as any other barrier we might face in this transition. And lastly, circularity can be part of giving us this competitive edge that we're talking a lot about, and I'll dive a lot more into that a bit later, to make sure that EU can stay self-sufficient, but also less depending on non-EU supplies. Let's unfold these 3 key takeaways, and I'm going to start from the top. Circularity hasn't taken off. The global circularity rate is currently declining with approximately 20% or so. That leaves us at a sad 7.2% at the global rate. This clearly states that the situation we're in, that we still haven't managed to decouple economic growth from resource extraction. This is, of course, something we need to focus on. Not only this, but also to make sure that we are going to use way less materials, but also use materials for way longer, and also using products again and again. We need to promote a closed loop system whenever we work within product-heavy companies. The good news is that today, and also as Sven he introduced just a bit before, I have 2 great examples of companies where they actually have managed to do a lot of this work. I have Lina from Danfoss and also Magnus from Remarkable. And they're going to talk a bit more about how have then they broken some of these barriers. But not only having it on a company scale, we need it on a more national and even international level to see the scale that we need to succeed with this transformation. So that is the circularity part. If we then look into climate and the climate targets we're looking at, we're unfortunately seeing that there is a bit of a delayed and also revisiting of net zero targets within the industry. This comes because, of course, that we are now slowly starting to realize that reaching net zero is really difficult. If we look outside of electrification, it's really difficult because we need to address our business model, but also the products that we produce. And this is, of course, the difficult part because now we touch about the core principles of our companies. And on top of this, on top of the current situation, we also have geopolitical uncertainty and instability that doesn't make ESG efforts a straightforward path for us right now. But let's not talk anymore about the current situation. Let's instead start talking about why it is important to scale circularity. And for this, I've brought with me a 2-folded focus. First of all, we need to, as I said before, we need to decouple economic growth from resource consumption. According to recent research, we at least need to reach a minimum of 5% resource productivity per year, year on year. What does that then mean? Well, it means that you as a company need to, if you want to produce the same amount of products that you're currently doing, then you need to have a 5% lower resource input that you currently have now to stay on track, to make sure that we stay within healthy planetary boundaries. Let's then think about that most companies also have some sort of growth target as part of their business strategies. Then you need to add this growth target to this resource productivity target on top of it. Let's say it's 10%, then all of a sudden this target becomes 15. If we just stay for the simplicity of the 5%, I think the 5% already there is quite a big toll to ask most companies to kind of succeed within. And I'm still to see that we can reach this 5% resource productivity year on year on a bigger scale than what we're seeing right now. But this is the bare minimum we need to succeed within. And we need to hold each other accountable for this 5% product resource productivity year on year if we want to have and if we want to stay within healthy planetary boundaries. The second part of why circularity is important to scale is to stay competitive. And not only competitive if we look towards the World Economic Forum, but also in terms of resilience. So if we look at the World Economic Forum, they are stating that circularity is key in terms of economic value, also in terms of increasing resilience, and also in terms of long-term competitiveness. Luckily, EU policymakers are very much aligned with this. So even though we are seeing a bit of some simplification packages coming out, well known as the Omnibus, we still see a high focus from EU when it comes to linking circularity to decarbonisation efforts. We are seeing this through the Clean Industrial Deal, the Critical Raw Material Act, we've seen it through the Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, and so much more that is coming this way. And EU is stating that this is part of making sure that EU, for the long run, can be more self-sufficient and also less depending on non-EU materials. And lastly, we also need to stay ahead of our competitors. And if we have to be completely blunt, then I think we need to acknowledge that China, as it is for now, they are our main industrial competitor. China has been able to actually scale the efforts of renewable energy systems, scaling cleaner production and products, leading their nations to decarbonize in a very rapid pace. And we in EU also need to get there. But let's start maybe now unfolding a bit about what it is we need to change and how we need to change it. And I'm going to start at the latter part of this. So let's go to the next slide, please. If we talk about how we need to change, I'm going to be a little bit frank and say that I think most of the materials we need to have to actually understanding how to change and how to transition into a circular economy, I think we have most of that knowledge in place. If we just look at this slide here, we have a great guide, the Circular Action Guide, been co-developed with a lot of big companies, leading companies here in the world, both IKEA, Google, Netflix, Oatly, and so many more. So I'm gonna say the frank thing that I think we know how to do it. The question is then, what is it that is stalling our progress? Well, we at Nordic Sustainability have identified 3 main barriers. If we go to the next slide here, then we have identified these 3 key barriers: technical barriers, financial barriers, and human barriers. And I'm just gonna dive in a little bit to each of them so we can understand what they actually entail. First of all, the technical barriers is about addressing our product portfolio. So how are we going to shift our product portfolio into a more circular one through, for example, design strategies, design integration, identifying innovative materials, and also in terms of incorporating some of these innovative materials. Not only that, we also have to close the loop by making sure that materials that stay within our system, and we can do that by, for example, recovering and also reusing material and making sure that they do not turn into waste. If we look into the financial barriers, and I think this one is really interesting, because we need to start exploring and also expanding new markets for new circular product portfolio. And to do so, we need to look into way more long-term funding opportunities. And the reason why we have to do that is that circular strategies and in general transitioning into circular business model is going to require a fairly high degree of upfront investments. And also the financial gains will come at a lower pace than what we're used to. So we need to search for different type of funding measures. China, that I mentioned before, has been relying heavily on state subsidized financing. But since that's clearly not an option, at least right now, within Danish border and also on a European level, then what do we have to do to enable more patient investment? And then we have the human barriers. And the human barriers are two-folded, I would say. It's 2-dimensional. We have to work with this. First of all, of course, we need to look internally within our companies. So we need to make sure that we have a high degree of top management buy-in. We also need to make sure that we have onboarded all of our colleagues in different departments, all the way from R&D, product development, production, procurement, logistics, and so on, to make sure that we actually can create this transition. That's the internal part. If we then look externally, then we also need to engage with our customer base, because if we're going to transition into a circular economy, then our customers also need to interact and engage with our products in a different way. And we need to make sure that our customers not only accept this, but also support us in this transition that we're making. If we then just pause a bit on this slide, because as you can see that I've made one of these barriers, the red one, this is the technical one, and that's the one we'll be focusing on for today's session. That's also where Lina and Magnus will dive more into how have they then solved some of the technical barriers they have experienced within their organizations. But not to say that the financial and the human barriers are also very important. So if anyone here in the community, in the chat, I can see the chat is going on really strong. If anyone works within an organization where you think you have managed to actually solve the financial barriers and also the human barriers, then please drop us a link to some of the material or your webpage or some of the work that you've been doing. And then we can actually all be inspired today by sharing relevant information with each other. Yes. And then maybe just my final remark will be on the next slide here, because when we at Nordic Sustainability work with, I'm just going to change slide. Yes. So when we at Nordic Sustainability work with integrating circularity into business model and also changing product portfolio, I actually like to change and shift around the approach that we do it. So we normally wouldn't start necessarily with the technical barriers. We would actually start with the human barriers and making sure that we have that top level buy-in from management, from C-suite, from board of directors, and also from the rest of the organization, making sure that we have stakeholder management both internally in the organization, but also externally with your customer base. Then we move on to the financial one, where we have to explore and find avenues for new financing. And then when we have these two in place, then we always manage somehow to solve some of the technical barriers that comes from transitioning to this. In my view, changing into circularity is much more of a change management approach. It's much more of a market creation exercise, more than actually a technical exercise. And if we want to scale circularity to the place where it can become competitive and it can give us resilience, then we need to make sure that we have these two ones in place first. And to get there, we need to ask some of these challenging questions, and some of these maybe you would even consider uncomfortable questions, such as, we want to have a 40% portfolio that is 100% circular, or 40% circular product portfolio. How do we get there? We want to make sure that 50% of all of our products are refurbished. But how are we going to get there? Which resources do we need? Which people do we need to involve? And also, if we want to up our service units and make a significant revenue contribution here, then how are we going to do that? How are we going to decouple our material inflow with our economic growth? That's some of the questions I hope you'll take with you from at least my session here and bring into your organizations. That was all for me. Thank you so much for listening in.
Thank you so much, Minna. Super. Right over to you, Lina.
Thank you, Sven. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you to all of those of you that attended this session today. I'm very excited. So my name is Lina. I work in Danfoss for the last 3 years, leading circular economy agenda, responsible for the strategy, our corporate targets, and their implementation and integration in our internal processes. Next slide. I need to be a little bit fast. Next one. So what is Danfoss? Most of you probably know Danfoss from the thermostats, which can be found in our homes and in our workplaces. And it's one of the few consumer-facing products, however, representing a very, very small, tiny bit of our revenue, because it's one of the few products that is not hidden behind the walls or behind the appliances and systems. However, Danfoss is much more than thermostats. Next slide. So Danfoss is a company with a global footprint, having equal presence in Europe, Americas, and Asia. Around 40,000 people worldwide are employed, and we have an annual sales around 10 billion euros. And we are split into 3 different segments, which of course makes our job with sustainability a little bit more challenging. Danfoss Power Solutions, Climate Solutions, and Danfoss Power Electronics and Drives. Next slide. So Danfoss Power Solutions designs and manufactures a complete range of engineered components and systems, from hydraulics and electrification, fluid conveyance, electronic controls, and software. Danfoss Climate Solutions designs products and systems for heating and cooling of buildings and industrial facilities. And Danfoss Drives offers frequency converters to optimize efficiency for any electric or motor technology. So very diverse portfolio, completely different industries, and a huge global footprint. Next slide. Our purpose is to engineer solutions that increase machine productivity, reduce emissions, lower energy consumption, and enable electrification. We are a family-owned company dedicated to create long-term value. So you can see that in our purpose, sustainability is very much engraved there, and it's part of our DNA actually. So next slide. So this is why we have identified 3 main pillars on our work. It's decarbonisation, circularity, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So these are our 3 focus areas in Danfoss, where we have also corporate targets. Of course, we work with also other things around sustainability, but these are the key three main, let's say. Next one. So I'm here to talk to you about our work with circular economy. So our vision in Danfoss is to design best-in-class products with circularity at their core, grow business models that deliver lasting value through regeneration and durability, and advanced sustainable sourcing. So we have targets in all these three things. First target on 80% of the newly developed products covered by our circularity approach by 2030 talks very much about what we do with innovation, what we do with new product development, where basically we are asking all the teams working in R&D to assess and improve the products they develop on circularity based on an internal tool we have developed and we have verified with a third party. Then we have another target around circular business revenues, where we aim to increase that by 2030 from 2023 baseline by 25%. And then we are part of the First Movers Coalition in aluminium, and as part of that commitment, we aim to have 10% of all the primary aluminium that we source to be low carbon according to the FMC definition by 2030, and 50% of the total volume of our aluminium that we procure per year to be from secondary sources by 2030. So these are our targets, and a little bit what we are working on, we have worked on until now, and we will continue to work the remaining of the year to launch take-back pilots across some of our key divisions, and work a little bit with take-back to drive cross-segment, let's say, work on circular business revenue. We have our target, and now we are identifying projects with big impact on our circular business revenue target. Publish the internal sustainable design standard, apply the circularity tools we have developed in innovation process across all the divisions. We are working now on launching a new index on circularity. We are having workshops for design for service and repair, and we are looking into developing value propositions for material harvesting and remanufacturing in selected product families. And in order to meet our FMC, First Movers Coalition commitment, we are working to collect primary supplier data. Next slide. So now that you saw a little bit what our targets are, what does circularity mean for Danfoss? So we took Ellen MacArthur Foundation butterfly diagram, the technical part of it, and we saw what it means for us. And all the different circles, of course, have a meaning for our product via repair, upgrade, and maintenance activities, reusing of components, refurbishing, and manufacturing products. This is something that we are testing in all our segments, and efficient recycling in the end of life. Next slide. So when we look at the targets, it's very interesting to explain how we plan to meet them. We plan to meet them by having a systematic approach and looking into different aspects of circular economy, because circular economy can mean so many different things. So what do we mean when we are talking about circular business revenues, and what do we mean when we are talking about circularity assessment in the innovation process? So we have identified, as I told you, what circularity means for us, and we are focusing on 3 principles of rethink, reduce, and recirculate. And around these principles, we have identified 10 different strategies that influence the design of our products and influence also the circular business revenues. These 10 different strategies are split into 30 distinct guidelines that affect product design. And then based on this framework, we have developed tools that we use to assess and evaluate products on circularity. Next slide. I don't want to, it's a little bit busy slide. I don't want to dig into that, but we have published also an external paper. I can put the link in the chat with a little bit more elaborate explanation of the different strategies. But when we are talking about rethinking, we are looking at design for disassembly, durability, modularity, reinventing, rethinking the way of delivering the products, reducing, which means looking at the choice of material, production processes, packaging, and energy use for the products we develop, and recirculating, looking to what extent we can use, we can repair, maintain, and upgrade products that we develop, so design for repair, to what extent we can design them to be easily refurbished or remanufactured, and as a last resort, how we can harvest components and parts and recycle them. Next slide. So some cases, some examples of how we have applied some of these strategies practically into Danfoss is in Power Solutions. We have a remanufacturing facility of pumps where we also train distributors, and we take the pumps, assemble them, and remanufacture them and sell them. Then for climate solutions, we have offered with another company as a venture refrigeration service, where we have leased refrigeration systems and offer extended warranty and repair and maintenance possibilities. And in power electronics and drives, with our C7, our new drive, we have looked very much into materials use. So we have reduced the weight of aluminum, and we are offering also a full suite of services during the life cycle of the drive. So after we sell it, we offer a lot of different services, repair, preventive maintenance, remote monitoring, and yeah. Next slide. So another interesting case that we also featured last year in our report is the take back of thermostats. So only in Denmark, we are collecting up to 500,000 thermostats that are discarded as waste every year. So we wanted to do something about it. With a customer, we piloted to collect thermostats. We established 10 collection points in Denmark. We collected back those thermostats, and we invested into looking how to recycle the plastic in the thermostats to be used for new products, new thermostats. Next slide. So enough about the cases. The cases are some examples how we are integrating circular economy into the different activities, but we have a little bit more systematic approach, especially when we are talking about the new product development. So based on these principles, Rethink, Reduce, Recirculate, we have developed also a very comprehensive sustainable design guide. And together with that, we have developed a toolbox that can help teams during the innovation phase assess and improve the products on both circularity and carbon. We have developed an internal tool inspired by a very nice tool that was developed by DTU, actually, we call it Research, which helps assess the performance of the project and identify high impact areas for improvement. We will launch now one index on circularity. We call it Danfoss Circularity Index to measure the circularity potential of the product. We have a tool for front end, so before the innovation process in this early idea generation process to assess what ideas will have a potential impact on sustainability. We have a carbon footprint tool based on LCA, a tool for packaging to assess different options of packaging, and we also have the Danfoss negative list based on restricted substances that we shouldn't have in our products. So all of that goes into the new product development and influences the decisions on how we develop products for the future. Next slide. And these different tools are integrated into the different steps of the development process, the different steps of innovation. So before it's scaled, we need to deliver an assessment and show an improvement. So in the beginning, you do an assessment, you identify areas that you could potentially improve the product, then you are working towards that, you redo the assessment and show how what the improvement has been. So this is the concept. Yes, next slide. And the final one, I hope I was rather quick, sorry for the long slides, but some of the learnings on implementing circularity on a global scale. And bear in mind that in Danfoss, as I said, we are a lot of people, very diverse portfolio, very different segments, with completely different products. So it's a lot of change management, a lot of stakeholder management with a lot of different industries as a focus area with different needs. So how do we do it? We provide all the available tools and resources to measure circularity holistically. It's very important that people have the right tools in place to be able to do that measurement. And because we work with a lot of engineers need very nice tools to be able to work with them. And then it's important that we allocate resources and define roles and responsibilities across the organization. We made a connection last year actually to the business revenue. So we had a specific target around that because we saw the need to make the business case internally for circularity, to connect circularity with quantified revenues. And then train and support. This is also very important that we continuously train and support the people in that journey. We are there with them during the assessments in the first years, and then we let them do the assessments on their own. So we have ambassadors all across the company. And tracking, we have a performance management system where we can see how many assessments are done, where we can see what project we have identified as the potential for circular business revenue. So tracking is very important, especially when you're working in a big matrix organization, to know what is going on and in which areas you need to intervene. Yeah, that was it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lina, for sharing all this detail about what you've gone through. And I think Danfoss is such an interesting example because also I think business model and industry-wise, it lends itself so well to circularity, and you can also see that with the depth of the integration that you have. So thanks for sharing. There's a bunch of questions already. Look forward to covering them in the Q&A. Magnus, over to you.
Thank you, Sven, and super interesting to listen to you, Lina and Mina, and thank you guys for having me here. So my name is Magnus. I'm the VP of Sustainability and Remarkable. I'm in my 4th year at Remarkable. Really enjoying my time here and doing some really interesting stuff every single day. So let's see. Yeah, maybe I should just say next slide. I tried to do something fancy, but perfect. So I can start a bit about our company. For those of you who doesn't know us, we are HQ'd in Oslo in Norway. We have around 600 employees, mostly in Norway, but we also have some in the UK and some in the US. We are a unicorn. And if we go to the next slide, we are producing what we call paper tablets. So we have released 4 versions of the paper tablet. We have the Remarkable 1, and then we have pictured here Remarkable 2, Remarkable Paper Pro, and Remarkable Paper Pro Move, which is the small paper tablets to the right-hand side there. We actually released that last week, and I'm very, very proud to say that this is our most sustainable product ever. And I will, of course, come back to that a bit later, but thought it was worth mentioning for this Psarra for sure. You can actually go one back for now, and all these products also have different accessories, like the marker, like a pen that works with it, and the folios and accessories that fit quite perfectly with the device. We also have a software called Connect, which is helping you to connect your tablet to your different IT systems and a lot of other things. It's quite convenient. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So when it comes to sustainability and Remarkable, our starting point has been to acknowledge that everything we do impacts the world around us. Meaning, this morning when I went to work, I made a decision to take the tram to work. I could have made the decision to walk. I could have made the decision to take my motorbike, but I decided to take the tram. And that impacts the world in a way. Minor impacts, but it has some kind of impact. I think that same would go for us as a company. It goes for us as a society, or as a country, or, could go as big as you will, or as small as you will. And these impacts can be positives and they can be negatives. So realizing that means that also for us, at least, that we need to sort of integrate those impacts into our decision making in some way. So we will try to maximize all the positives and try to minimize the negatives. And it's rather difficult to manage all of them, obviously, because there's a lot. So basically what we need to do, we need to focus down. We need to prioritize our key impacts. And that is because then we do believe that we can get the most bang for the bucks, meaning that for the effort we put in, we think we can get the best possible results. So what we did, we used the double materiality analysis, which I'm pretty sure that everyone listening to this know quite well what is. And if you don't, we could probably address that later. But we use that not only as the compliance CSRD tool as it is, we also use it as a strategic tool to actually really understand our risks, our opportunities, and our impacts. And then we try to prioritize very strictly and act accordingly to that. So maybe not a big surprise, but what we figured out were our key impacts was circularity and climate. So let's go to the next slide, shall we? So even though circularity and climate are our key impacts, we also, of course, work quite broadly with sustainability. At the foundation, of course, is our sustainability governance model, which is the core of everything we do. And we need to have a functioning governance in order to function, basically, with what we do and to fit into the strategic work with the company. We work with our supply chain to ensure that suppliers have fair and decent working conditions and that we do not contribute to human rights violations. And of course, also to reduce our GHG emissions throughout our value chain. And we also make sure, of course, that internal practices within our company are really good when it comes to employees and our impacts in general. I also use the word transparency here, which is a word we actually use quite a lot instead of communications, because we do believe that we need to be honest about all these positive and negative impacts we do have, enabling our stakeholders to make informed decisions. So this is sort of our take to be very clear that we will avoid greenwashing and any form of that, and rather be very upfront about whatever we do and whatever impact we do know we have or suspect we have. However, the circularity strategy is the key contributor, I think, to achieve most of our sustainability goals, which I think makes sense also from being the place we have the most impact. And this is also where I believe like a relatively small company like Remarkable in an industry who's huge with like mammoth companies as well, that we can actually make a difference and hopefully also, of course, make the world a bit better. So I will go into now in the next slides, I will go into our circularity strategy and then also the product sustainability strategy. And at the end, I will also discuss where we are at now and also discuss some of the challenges that we met. And I really loved your intro, Mina, because you actually pinpointed, where we're at and, sort of the issues that we are. So I think the discussions later is going to be super interesting from my side, at least. So when it comes to circularity strategy, our vision is to be building circular ecosystems to enable longevity and improve sustainability impacts. I hope that will be quite evident going ahead, but we base this work on the waste hierarchy principles. But as the elephant, as it is, we divided the overview on circularity into smaller pieces. So when it comes to input materials, that covers all the materials that goes into making the products across mechanical, electrical, and technological components. It covers the steps from sourcing raw materials until the manufactured components, and until we have assembled it into a final product. But it also includes energy usage. So our long-term goal is to have as much as possible of these inputs from recycled sources. And when it comes to energy, that means, of course, as much as possible of the energy from renewable energy. So the use phase, that covers the time when the product is in use of a customer. This could be both one specific customers, or it could be multiple sequential customers. Our long-term goal here is that our products have multiple life cycles, meaning that every product should have at least 2 or more usages during its lifetime. And I think one key thing, which is a bit back to the human side here, is that our industry is actually called consumer electronics. I think the word consumer in consumer electronics, that is, the problem in that sense. So I'm trying to sort of change the narrative into like talking about user electronics or electronics users, but that's a long way to go there. But I think the consumer word there is quite interesting in itself. Lastly, we have the end of life, which covers the steps from when a product is disposed of by a customer until the components and materials have been handled either by recycling or creation or reuse or anything. Of course, components can be looped back into inputs, either as components itself or materials, and can be used for other products. And our long-term goal here is to fully avoid landfill and minimize as much as possible energy recovery, meaning that most materials in a product should be recycled or reused, but once again, in line with the waste hierarchy. So the higher on the highest possible, the better. So all of these 3 areas quite clearly, I think, impact all parts of Remarkable, from product design, sourcing, reverse logistics, strategy, software, and many, many more. So as different levers to achieve this strategy, we have developed the before mentioned product sustainability strategy. We work with our circular business models and operations to enable these business models, and to make sure also that, of course, they have the desired effects. But I think also the key word for me that we need to have in place for all of this to work is longevity, because none of this will work if the products that we build and the design, if they don't last, and if they're not repairable, if they're not, if they will stop working after a couple of years. So I like to quote a guy who's the CEO of a Swedish clothing make called Asket. His name is August Ord Bringeus. And he told me once, and I call ahead with him, he said, like, longevity is king. And I think that is really, really true. So that is something I stole from him, and I'm quoting him as much as possible. So let's go to next slide, please. So the product sustainability strategy is quite fitting, I think, then. Has a vision to place longevity into the heart of a product development to reduce environmental impact. And the goal for this strategy is to deliver products that combine durability and multiple life cycles coupled with minimal resource usage and CO2 emissions. We have prioritized different tracks for the paper tablets and the different accessories, as the impacts differ based on what kind of products they are. And I thought, just to give one example, and I thought it would be fitting to use the new Remarkable Paper Pro as it's brand new, and as I said, our most sustainable paper product, actually, but paper tablet as well, as of yet. So we worked on recycled content of that. So I will give a couple of examples of what we've done there. We have achieved 100% recycled rare earths in the magnets there, which is really, really cool. We also have 100% recycled cobalt in the battery and 100% recycled aluminium in the middle frame and power button. We work to have the best repairability in the business, and we have achieved that when we do repairability of the Remarkable Paper Pro Move, there's only 4 small screws, like really, really small ones, and 2 pieces of tape that we cannot reuse. Every other single component can be reused unless it's destroyed. So that's design there. It's absolutely mind-blowing and brilliant. It's hundreds of parts in this thing, and there's like only 6 parts we can't reuse, which I think it's really, really cool. Like if you put a number in this, it will be more than 99% repairable. It's something I'm really, really happy about. And this also, of course, means that the assembly of the Paper Pro is easier than ever, and enabled us to be able to reuse components and recycle materials, of course. The CO2 emissions are also reduced with more than 25% compared to a zero game or not doing anything, due to recycled materials, but also to increased use of renewable energy in the production. So I think if you look at these 3 areas in the product sustainability strategy and the remarkable Paper Pro move, that we have good traction in actually sort of all of these steps here with the product. And I am actually super happy. I'm very, very proud about that achievement. So if we go to the next slide, which I think should be my last one, I thought to just put a bit of where we are now and a bit where I see the challenges as well, which, you know, Mina's introduction was such a beautiful start for this, because I'm going right in there where we have the challenges. So I think when it comes to the governance, this is something that we have, something that is working okay and working good, but we're not really found our ideal way of working quite yet, but we're closing in on the different models or try to adjust it just to find the model that works really, really well for us as a company. I think we are quite close to there, but it's in the progress. When it comes to our supply chain work, I do believe actually we're quite mature when it comes to that. We've worked closely with all our contractual suppliers, and we have quite a good overview on our tier 2s and okay overview of tier 3s. We do have sustainability and compliance as topics in every business review with our contractual partner. We have KPIs that we are constantly improving and tracking our suppliers on. And I do think that we are doing quite okay work there. When it comes to the climate, we are working with this too, and we actually had some really good results here without actually having finalized our overarching transition plan yet, which it's a bit of a backward thing, but at least we have some results, and the transition plan, of course, is in the making and will be done in not too far distance. When it comes to the transparency part, we aim strictly and strongly to communicate honestly and openly about our impacts, both the positives and negatives, as I mentioned. I think you can actually visit, if you're interested, visit remarkable.com/sustainability. You can see how we do it there. And then I think it's interesting to have a look if you like to do that, and please give me feedback. I love to get feedback on that, or even better if you send it to someone else than me, so I can get some traction on that internally as well, but that's okay. And then when it comes to our key impact, circularity, this is, as I mentioned, I think our must-win battle. And I think we are really, really well on board with the product sustainability strategy. And I think that we put us in the position we're enabled to approach more circular business models, and the products have really, really great longevity. Remarkable ones. The first one was launched for 10 years ago or something like that, and they're still working very well and still being supported by our softwares, which I think is quite cool. And then we have the issues with the business models and to find the exact right way to do the operations around that. And that is sort of where we are working now, to trying to find the right way to do that for a company like ours. And this is sort of where we're at now, and we haven't found the right way to do that. And I guess hopefully that's what we can discuss a bit later today as well.
Thanks, Magnus. Super good insights as well. And I think there's also such a clear difference both in kind of the size of the company and the levers you have, but also the type of product, of course, you sell, right? And I think it's been really interesting to see that, you know, at Remarkable, especially, a lot of the answer lies in longevity in what is an extremely fast moving consumer goods cycle, right? And of course also better design, and especially on the repairability, you guys have made such great progress. I wonder, there was also a question about the kind of supplier engagement, and if you could just briefly go into the into how you work with suppliers, because I think it's obvious that a big impact would also come from the electronics you have in the products, right? And yours is actually quite a cool model where you're a relatively small company still, despite being a unicorn, but you have these very close supplier relationships, right? So just 2-3 more sentences on that would be great. And I'd love for us to try to answer questions relatively quickly, because we have so many good questions that I think we can spend another half hour here.
Yeah. With the suppliers, before we enter into contracts, we do a lot of assessments on them. We use some external tools to just make sure they are up to standard. And then we have like component or material specific questions, depending on what kind of components and materials they are. So during, and then we have, of course, our supply code of conduct that every supplier needs to sign on to. So we have like a set of minimum standards there. We also then we have KPIs and we have data points. The data points we gather annually. We need them for reporting purposes, and the KPIs we gather for every business review typically is every quarter with the supplier, and we track them. And for the KPIs, we set targets annually for the suppliers, and we work with them and make sure that we follow the targets and we try to reach the targets, of course, every year. And of course, whenever there's an incident related to anything, we will follow up on that, and we request our suppliers to get in touch with us as soon as possible, so we're aware. And we do also focus a lot on visiting the suppliers and have close relationship and be the company who is not telling the suppliers what to do, but we're talking with them and trying to make them understand why we want them to do things, which I think is a difference from some other companies in our industry.
Yeah, it seems like a very collaborative approach. Super interesting. One more question for you, Magnus. There's a question in the chat about how the strategy or to include recycled materials or change designs has impacted your cost base. So can you talk a little bit more about the financials of this design integration? Can you only do it because you have a relatively, a premium target group of customers where the costs don't matter so much, or was it actually not a big cost driver?
That's a really, really good question. And we could be more, our products could have more recycled content if we were willing to increase the cost of the production of the tablets or the accessories more. So this is always a balancing act. So what we try to do, we try to figure out where we can, get the biggest impact for the least possible money. And, because we want to obviously keep the money as much as possible for ourselves and not increase the price more than what we need to do. But of course, we want to also make sure we have sustainable products.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe last question before I take a few questions for Lina. To what extent do you see customers actually asking for this and asking for a better breakdown of sustainability related data? Because this is also interesting, and I think it reflects what we see with other industries, that there's a high level request for slightly more recyclable, better repairability, but there's no one yet asking for maximum recycled input share, for example, right? And how do you see that potentially changing? Complex question, I know.
Yeah. No, I to be honest, I don't think this is something customers ask for too much, at least not B2C customers. I think it's more like an expectations that you have at least some parts of it in place, like special climate and some recycled content and so on. But this is not something like, you don't have like tons of customers calling us and saying, why don't you have 100% recycled this and that? We don't have that. But when it comes to the enterprise customers, we see more and more B2B customers, we see more and more approach, during the different sustainability properties, and these are of course a value prop as well for them.
Interesting. Good. Similar. We see more and more on the B2B side. Thanks. Let's see if we can have some more cross questions. But before that, Lina, I would love to come to you. There was a couple questions. Maybe you can answer that quickly, because you do have such a cool target structure. What is the current level of circular product revenue and kind of current product of design integration percentage? If you can share with us, just so for people to understand kind of the gap of where you're trying to get to from where you are.
Yes, very good question. So when we are talking about innovations, we introduced the tools, I think it must have been late 23. And in 23, we did a lot of workshops, a lot of engagement sessions, and then we identified the ambassadors. Last year, we had the system ready. We started measuring last year. So in 24, we actually included it in the report, and in 25, now we are ready with the final target, because originally we started measuring how many of the new product developments have actually done an assessment, regardless of whether these products will be launched in the market or not, to see how this target is picked up by the organization internally, to see how many teams are actually doing the assessment, how many they are not. But now we are going towards the final target, which is the products that are actually launched. Of course, you understand that the innovation process can last several months or maybe even years. So this is why it took us some time. So we started from zero. Zero is the baseline because we didn't have anything before. And I need to say that this year, we will be happy to report 50% of all around 50%, as it is now, and maybe this will change until the end of the year. Big disclaimer there, but the figure shows that nearly half of the projects that have been launched this year have done an assessment, and many of them have demonstrated an improvement. So we are in a very good position. I need to say, I didn't expect that. So I'm pretty confident that we will reach the target, and we will have assessments and also improvements until 2030. But of course, you don't know, things can change. But the figure is very promising, and change management really worked. But we had a lot of engagement. It took us a lot of time, a lot of sessions, many ambassadors around the company to get here.
Maybe that already starts answering my next question, because someone asked about how do you govern this, right? It's clear how much more complexity you have in your business, how many more SKUs you have, as opposed to the rather, excuse me, Magnus, if I call your business simple, but with 3 products, it's a different setup, right? You have 3, major business divisions. How do you govern that? What were the challenges? Did you have, to the extent you can share, differences in buy-in levels? How did you tackle that?
As I said, via network of ambassadors, the 3 key segments that we have, they all have their own sustainability teams and experts working on circular economy. Together with them, we co-created all of this. And we did that in a common, let's say, working group that we have internally. And these people then connected in their own different parts of their organizations, in climate solutions, in drives and power solutions, in the different divisions, identified the ambassadors, and then these ambassadors went into the different R&D teams, did workshops together with them, with the support of the sustainability professionals from the segment sustainability team, sometimes also with me. So a lot of engagement and a lot of hand-holding in the beginning. And anchoring these initiatives in the different organizations. And I think I need to say, sometimes you don't need to have an official mandate for these things, but sometimes you do. So it's important to also connect with the leadership team in the different divisions in different parts of the organization, and ensure that they are on board with that and they support the target, and that they can dedicate resources for such assessments. And,
Super, thanks. We're slowly coming up on time, but I'd love to take up this question. There's a question about how you see the ESPR and the digital product passport, so basically the incoming regulation on EU level influencing your C strategies. And I'd love to maybe give each of you, including you, Mina, 40 seconds to talk about. Of course, so far there's no omnibus on products yet. So let's hope they come through, but to see how does regulation still shape the work you do, or do you also see that changing right now? Maybe Lina, would you like to start?
Yeah. Really quick. Of course, this requires us to go into a deeper level and look specific at product. And this means that we definitely need to look in the entire value chain. And this requires us to work more closely with both our customers and our suppliers to then understand better the end of life of the product, because our customers can be further down the chain. So we don't even sometimes know, because we are a B2B company. So this makes it very tricky. And work closely with our suppliers to identify different characteristics and properties of the products, such as recycled content. So a lot of work there, I think, and a lot of work on creating even more tools to identify product-specific characteristics based on the bill of materials, like recycling content, recyclability, etc., repairability.
Thanks, Magnus. And I hope it's okay. I keep everyone just a couple minutes longer. That would be great.
Yeah, I think I can sort of just underpin just what Lina said, but maybe also with the one difference which makes it a bit different for us. I think it's like with the product portfolio, like you mentioned, Sven, like our smaller portfolio, like a bit smaller than Danfoss. Danfoss is. It makes, I think our business is very much linked into our products in that sense. So it's like, I think we're probably closer to each product already, and or maybe to suppliers as a supply base is like, you know, substantially smaller, I would presume, than Danfoss does. But yeah, other than that, I think Lina said it pretty well, or really well, actually.
Thank you. Mina?
Sorry for the delay here. I had to unmute myself. I actually just linked our recent article on ESPR here in the chat also for people to look into more of this. But I think what I can say from an external, and I will look at Lina and Magnus and the way you operate your business, I think you'll have a good start on the ESPR, because it requires a lot in terms of recycled content, reuse content, repairability, remanufacturing, refurbishment, and all of these elements of circular design strategies, and you already have a good start there for enabling your reporting related to that. So I think get a good start ahead. We still only have the first working plan implemented with the different 6 sectors that are going to be addressed first, and then the rollout will start from there.
Thanks, Mina. Final last question. There was the last question here in the chat from Jeff about the very difficult question that I think is also the elephant in the room, right? What is the trade-offs and the lines between profit maximization and our sustainability efforts, right? And I think I won't put you right on the spot to answer this for your companies, but I wondered if you could each give the advice you have from experience you have about when you had to discuss the trade-offs between your circularity efforts and internal profit calculation, right? What would you give to the audience as an advice how to have that conversation the best way if you've had those or potential resource? And if it's too dicey, you're welcome to say that you have a meeting that's starting right now, and we need to cut off the session. Lina, would you like to start?
Yeah, okay. Difficult question, Sven. So our efforts to actually make that link is via the circular business revenue target. So we are also trying internally to create this business case for sustainability and specifically circularity, and identify what the long-term profit of introducing circular strategy will be. So we are trying to integrate that more and more to introduce, let's say, the concept of both sustainability and cost, and taking decisions based on this. But I think that the way that the world is evolving with the changes in the prices of raw materials, all these dramatic changes that we see in the world, no one can even foresee what the future holds and how the prices that are such volatile will evolve in the future. So I think that sustainability is a little bit more, it's also a safe option. That's what I also tell my internal stakeholders, that it's always a good idea, because it's you're building for the future.
Good answer, thanks. And Magnus, do you have any comments there?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. But it's always like, the short term versus long term. And I think circularity, as most sustainability games, are more long term than the short terms. But understanding the resilience part of it, understanding they're actually, we're actually using materials that will not be available unless we think circularity, unless we're actually using components that are super expensive to put together. And if we can reuse them, we can actually save money. That's sort of, putting the business cases into it, I think. And, the resilience, the risk part, I guess, is the way you need to do it. And then once again, it's a hard conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much, both. I very much agree. I think that's also something that's pretty important for the field at large to get closer and to understand. I think in many cases the kind of positive additional revenue generation is a smaller part of the value than the risk mitigation side, and just ensure, as Mina also said, we're able to compete in the future, and we create resilience in the business, right? While of course trying to move to a kind of impact reduction line that is aligned with what we need as society. Thanks to you three. Thanks to everyone who stayed on longer. We're still over 80 people. I think we could keep this going. We'll try to see if we can answer a few more of these questions as we send out the material. But really, thank you everyone for joining us this morning and sharing with us your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A good rest of the week.
Have a good one.
Bye.